My husband forgot I built our smart home, so I broadcasted his cheating confession through the ceiling. I was standing in the center of my custom-built kitchen, a heavy Wüsthof chef's knife in one hand and a crushed clove of garlic in the other, listening to another woman's voice echo through my 12-speaker surround sound. She was telling my husband exactly what she wanted him to do to her in the back seat of his SUV, and he was laughing, that slick, arrogant chuckle he usually reserved for his corporate clients. Code is my love language, and precision is my religion. As a senior mobile architect, my entire professional life revolves around creating flawless, impenetrable systems. Over the last 3 years, I had transformed our sprawling 4-bedroom house into a smart fortress. Every single lightbulb, deadbolt, thermostat, and speaker was hardwired into a localized server sitting in a climate-controlled rack in the basement. I wrote the Python scripts myself. I engineered the localized mesh network to ensure zero latency. Dan, my husband of 5 years, thought it was an eccentric hobby. He was a high-powered marketing executive, a man who lived on charm, firm handshakes, and perfectly tailored suits. To him, my tech obsession was just a quirk, a convenient luxury that meant the house was always at the perfect 71 degrees when he walked through the door. "You're a beautiful, paranoid genius, Lou," he would purr, wrapping his arms around my waist while I sat at my multi-monitor setup compiling code. "But you overcomplicate things. Life is about flow." Flow. That was his favorite word. Dan was always flowing from one client dinner to the next, flowing through rush hour traffic, flowing through life with an effortless glide that left me managing all the heavy lifting. Over the past 6 months, his flow had started requiring a lot of late nights. He claimed he was tethered to the 405 freeway, battling gridlock, trapped in a metallic sea of commuters. Whenever I questioned the hours, the faint smell of unfamiliar floral perfume on his lapels, or the way he placed his phone face down on the granite countertops, he deployed that weaponized charm. "You're analyzing data that isn't there, Lou," he hissed during an argument just 2 weeks prior, his jaw tight, his eyes flashing with a patronizing irritation that made my stomach twist. "I'm killing myself to secure the Thompson account so we can afford this ridiculous mortgage, and you're interrogating me like I'm a hostile program. Stop debugging our marriage." I swallowed the doubt. I forced myself to trust him. I poured my anxiety back into my work. It was Wednesday, April 1st, 2026. The evening was crisp, the sky bruised with deep purples and burnt oranges as the sun dipped below the California hills. I was in the kitchen, finding solace in the rhythmic, analog task of preparing a gourmet dinner. A rich, dark red wine reduction was simmering on the induction stove, filling the room with the sharp, sweet aroma of shallots and rosemary. My high-end Sonos Arc system, perfectly calibrated to the room's acoustics, was streaming a dense, highly technical cybersecurity podcast. At exactly 5:30 p.m., the OLED screen embedded in the refrigerator illuminated with a fresh notification. It was an iMessage from Dan. "Traffic is a parking lot. Might be another 90 minutes. Don't wait up for dinner, babe." I stared at the glowing pixels. A familiar, cold weight settled in the bottom of my ribcage. I felt the heat rising in my neck, a slow, crawling flush of humiliation and suspicion. My thumb hovered over the screen. I wanted to type a dozen different things. I wanted to demand a live location. I wanted to ask why the traffic maps on my secondary monitor showed the 405 was flowing at a steady 50 miles per hour. Instead, I forced my muscles to relax. I locked my jaw, tossed the phone onto the island, and returned to the cutting board. I brought the knife down on a fresh clove of garlic with enough force to dent the wood. I had recently spent a grueling, caffeine-fueled weekend optimizing our home's handoff logic. It was a brilliant piece of geofencing code. I designed it so that whenever a registered user crossed the invisible digital perimeter of the property, the system would seamlessly transfer whatever active media was playing on their mobile device to the nearest high-fidelity audio output. It was meant to be a frictionless transition. You walk out of your car listening to a Spotify playlist, and by the time your foot hits the welcome mat, the house speakers have already picked up the exact beat. At 6:15 p.m., the soothing voice of the podcast host discussing encryption protocols abruptly vanished. There was no fade out. There was no buffering hesitation. The kitchen was plunged into a heavy, suffocating silence, immediately followed by a jarring, low-frequency hum that vibrated the floorboards. As a developer, my brain bypassed confusion and instantly diagnosed the technical anomaly. A session initiation protocol, a SIP request, had just been forcibly accepted by the home network. My eyes darted to the command terminal I kept running on the kitchen iPad. Lines of code were scrolling at lightning speed. Dan's iPhone had just breached the driveway geofence. The device had disconnected disconnected from his SUV's Bluetooth system because the signal strength had dropped below the 10% threshold. Following the exact rules of my flawless logic, the phone had blindly reached out, performed a high-speed handshake with the Wi-Fi 7 node mounted in the garage, and securely anchored itself to the local area network. But it wasn't a Spotify playlist. It wasn't an audiobook. Because Dan's phone was currently engaged in an active, encrypted privacy mode voice call on his end, the Sonos system didn't recognize it as standard media. It read the active stream, bypassed the standard filters, and acted as the primary audio gateway. It stripped the audio from his earpiece and routed it directly, unfiltered, into the house. That's when the real bombshell dropped. The low hum cracked open, and the voice of a woman I had never heard before boomed through the recessed ceiling speakers at 75% volume. It wasn't the compressed, tinny sound of a standard phone call. My system utilized high-definition lossless audio processing. Her voice was crystal clear, intimate, dripping with a post-coital laziness that sent a violent electric shock straight down my spine. "God, I can still smell your cologne on my pillow," the woman purred, the syllables echoing off the imported Italian tile. "Tell the warden you're working late tomorrow night so we can finish what we started in the back seat." The air in my lungs turned to solid ice. I stood completely frozen, the heavy steel of the chef's knife gripped so tightly in my right hand that my knuckles blanched stark white. The smell of the simmering wine reduction suddenly made me violently nauseous. Then came the laugh. Dan's laugh. Rich, throaty, utterly devoid of the stress he claimed was crushing him. "She's already bought the traffic excuse, baby." Dan's voice vibrated through the kitchen, the bass from the subwoofer making the wine glasses on the rack tremble. "I'm literally pulling into the driveway now. I'll text you the second she goes to sleep." A pause. A wet smack of lips. "I love how easy she is to glitch. She lives in that little computer brain of hers. She doesn't see what's right in front of her." The audio was so impeccably crisp, so painfully pristine, that I could hear the rhythmic click-clack of his turn signal echoing through the 12-speaker array. I heard the crunch of the gravel under his tires. I heard the mechanical hum of his window rolling up. Every single ambient noise of his betrayal was being broadcast to me in Dolby Atmos. He hadn't hung up. He had pulled into the driveway, eyes on his rearview mirror, engrossed in his deceit, and completely forgot that he lived inside a machine built by the woman he was mocking. He didn't realize the call was still active. He didn't realize his phone was blindly obeying its programming, routing 100% of the audio away from his headset and directly into the kitchen zone. My vision narrowed until all I could see was the pulsing green light of the Sonos receiver on the counter. The blood roaring in my ears threatened to drown out the ceiling speakers, but the mistress kept talking, her voice a grating, saccharine whine against the pristine acoustics of my home. "Just make sure she doesn't check your location," she giggled, the sound sharp as broken glass. "I leave the burner in the desk drawer at the office," Dan replied smoothly, the heavy thud of his car door slamming shut echoing through the speakers a millisecond before I heard the actual, physical thud of it outside my window. "I've got the entire grid figured out, Lexi. Don't worry about the warden." I didn't scream. Screaming was for people who had lost control. Screaming was for victims. I had root access. I set the chef's knife down on the cutting board with deliberate, terrifying slowness. My hands weren't shaking. A cold, absolute clarity washed over me, a state of hyperfocus that usually only struck when I was deep into a complex debugging session. The anger wasn't a fire, it was liquid nitrogen, freezing my veins, hardening my resolve. I raised my left wrist. The sleek face of my Apple Watch illuminated. With 2 precise taps, I bypassed the standard interface and executed a custom-coded routine I had buried deep in the home's architecture. Run. Security Protocol Alpha Omega. The front door chimed. The heavy deadbolt retracted with a mechanized thud, an automated welcome home sequence I had programmed specifically for him. I heard his dress shoes hit the hardwood of the foyer. I heard him exhale a loud, theatrical sigh, rehearsing the exhaustion of a man who had supposedly just spent 2 hours battling gridlock. He rounded the corner into the kitchen, a weary commuter smile plastered on his perfectly stubbled face. His suit jacket was slung casually over one shoulder. His iPhone was gripped loosely in his left hand, the screen dark, completely unaware that the microphone was currently acting as a live broadcast module. "Hey, babe," he groaned, running a hand through his hair. "God, what a nightmare out there. I swear the city planning department needs to be." He stopped. The words died in his throat. The visual confirmation of my protocol engaged. The warm, inviting amber lights of the kitchen instantaneously snapped off. A split second later, the entire room was bathed in a deep, aggressive, blood-red glow. The Philips Hue bulb shifted to a blaring hex code #FF0000. The sudden change in illumination cast harsh, demonic shadows across the granite countertops and the stainless stainless steel appliances. Dan physically recoiled, his briefcase slipping from his grip and hitting the floor with a loud crack. "Lou," he stammered, his eyes darting around the crimson-soaked room. "What the hell is going on with the lights? Did the server crash?" I didn't blink. I didn't move. I just stared at him, my face a blank, unreadable mask, and tapped my watch one final time. I triggered the audio buffer. My server continuously recorded all incoming network traffic on a rolling 30-second loop for security analytics. I isolated the exact data packet from the handoff, clipped it, and pushed it back to the Sonos amplifier. I set it to an infinite loop. I cranked the digital volume dial to absolute maximum. The silence of the kitchen was shattered. "I can still smell your cologne on my pillow. Tell the warden you're working late tomorrow night so we can finish what we started in the back seat." The mistress's voice erupted from the ceiling, violently loud, shaking the dust from the air vents. Dan's face drained of color so fast he looked like a corpse. His jaw unhinged. He stared at the ceiling, then down at his phone, then at me. The smug, polished marketing executive completely dissolved, replaced by a terrified animal caught in a trap of its own making. "She's already bought the traffic excuse, baby. I'm literally pulling into the driveway now. I'll text you the second she goes to sleep. I love how easy she is to glitch." The loop repeated, louder. The bass hit so hard the wine glasses clinked together like nervous teeth. Dan scrambled, his thumbs frantically smashing against the black screen of his phone, desperately trying to sever the connection. Lou, wait, listen to me. This is a deep fake. This is a virus. The network got hacked. I stepped out from behind the kitchen island. The red light caught the edge of the Wüsthof knife on the cutting board, making it gleam like an executioner's blade. I pointed a single, steady finger straight up at the recessed speaker above his head. Through the deafening playback, the live feed of the phone call was still actively patching through his microphone. Lexi, completely bewildered by the sudden auditory assault echoing back to her through Dan's device, started shrieking. "Dan," the mistress's voice pierced through the bass, frantic and shrill. "Dan, what is that noise? Why am I hearing an echo? Dan, answer me. Who is playing that?" Dan dropped his phone onto the floor like it was a live grenade. He lunged toward me, his hands raised in surrender, his eyes wide and pleading. "Louise, please, shut it off. Let me explain." "The warden is awake, Dan," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the blaring audio loop with terrifying precision. It was cold, metallic, devoid of any human empathy. "And since you love the back seat so much, I've already moved your work-from-home setup into the driveway." "Lou, baby, please, you're not thinking straight," he yelled, the panic stripping his voice of all its smooth baritone resonance. "It meant nothing. She means nothing. Shut the system down. Your admin access to this house," I whispered, stepping so close to him I could smell the cheap, synthetic floral perfume layered underneath his expensive cologne, "has been permanently revoked." I tapped the central control panel mounted on the wall. The mechanized deadbolts on the front, back, and garage doors simultaneously fired with a deafening series of cracks, locking us inside. The automated smart blinds on the floor-to-ceiling windows slammed down like the blast doors of a bunker. Dan jumped back, spinning around as the house physically secured itself around him. "Get out," I commanded, pointing toward the front door. "This is my house too," he screamed, his face flushing with a sudden, desperate rage. He stepped toward me, trying to reclaim his dominance, trying to puff his chest out. "You can't just lock me out of my own life over a mistake." "Actually, Dan," I said, pulling up the property deed data on my watch and projecting it onto the refrigerator screen, "the mortgage is solely in my name. The servers are in my name. The network is mine. You are just a guest user. And your session has timed out." I triggered the sequence. The front door unlocked, swung open via the mechanized hinges, and a localized alarm in the foyer began emitting a high-pitched, ear-splitting siren meant to disorient intruders. Dan covered his ears, his face twisting in physical pain. He looked at me one last time, searching for a sliver of the woman he thought he could endlessly manipulate. He found absolutely nothing but dead code. He grabbed his briefcase and stumbled backward out the door, retreating into the cool night air. The moment his heel cleared the threshold, the door slammed shut, the deadbolt fired, the localized siren ceased. I walked over to the kitchen window and bypassed the blind lock, lifting the shade just enough to watch the live feed play out in reality. Dan was standing in the middle of the driveway, bathed in the harsh security floodlights that had immediately tracked his movement. He pulled his keys from his pocket and marched toward his pristine, black SUV. He grabbed the door handle and yanked. It didn't budge. He pressed the unlock button on his fob. Nothing happened. I smiled, a thin, cruel stretch of lips. Because I owned the central smart home hub, I had integrated every digital asset we possessed into my master control parameters. That included his vehicle, which, much like the house, was legally financed under my name to secure a lower interest rate. I had already executed a remote override. I locked the SUV's doors, disabled the engine immobilizer, and permanently disabled his remote start and climate control functions. It was a 3-ton brick of steel and leather. Through the glass, I watched Dan violently kick the tire of the car. He pulled his phone from his pocket, screaming into it, but I had completely blacklisted his MAC address from the network. He had no Wi-Fi. He had no car. He had no house. I didn't stop there. A localized victory wasn't enough. The system demanded a global broadcast. I walked back to my command terminal. I took the pristine, lossless audio file of the entire conversation, from Lexi's pillow talk to Dan's arrogant laughter to his pathetic, groveling pleas in the kitchen. I exported the file as a high-quality MP4. I opened our shared family cloud folder. This was the digital repository connected to his parents, his siblings, and his 2 incredibly judgmental sisters. I uploaded the file directly to the root directory. I set the notification alert to high priority. I titled the file, Dan's Traffic Report April 1st edition. I hit send. Within 4 seconds, my screen showed 7 red receipts. Outside, Dan was shivering in the driveway. The evening chill had dropped the temperature to 50 degrees. He was pacing furiously, pressing his phone to his ear, likely dealing with the immediate, catastrophic detonation of his family group chat. I tapped the final command on my dashboard. The smart glass windows of the entire front facade of the house instantly polarized, shifting from transparent to opaque obsidian black. The house visually erased him. The kitchen lights shifted back from the aggressive red to a calm, soothing amber. The looping audio cut out. The silence returned, heavy and beautifully peaceful. The smell of the rosemary and wine reduction lingered in the air. I picked up the chef's knife, wiped it clean with a towel, and went back to chopping the garlic. The glitch in the system hadn't been me. It had never been me. It was him. And a system is only secure once you identify the malware and permanently purge it from the hard drive. Am I the monster here, or did he get exactly what he deserved for thinking he could outsmart the architect of his own cage?
If you have made it this far and want to see more videos like this, then kindly subscribe and turn on notifications so you may never miss another story like this.